Okay, welcome everyone to Webdelics Live AMA. I'm Steve Elfrink. I'm your host tonight and the official subject matter expert with Webdelics. And tonight we're going to be talking about something kind of broad and exciting and very relevant with big news that happened this week. But we're going to be talking about the revolutionary power of plant medicines and mental health. So juicy topic, exciting, and we have a wonderful guest tonight. So quick housekeeping, this is a AMA, so AMA, ask me anything. So the beautiful thing about this format, it's your questions. So from folks out there, worldwide, questions that you might have. And the beautiful thing about, again, with tonight's topic, it's pretty wide open. So we're open for any questions. And we fielded a few questions already, or people have sent in some questions, so we have some preloaded. But you have the ability to add questions, comments, whatever social media platform you're on. I think right now we're on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So just in the comments there where the feed is, just throw something in there and it'll show up here and we'll bring those questions in. Then one other little detail is that beautiful QR code up in the corner. So that's gonna, if you scan that that bad boy, it'll take you to the Webdelics website, and then we encourage to sign up for our newsletter. Our newsletter goes out every Thursday. It's actually pretty informative, very informative, comprehensive, covering some new topics or the news updates, and just general information about psychedelics. So a little more deeper about me. So Steve Elfrink, a few of you have attended these webinars, know me, know my background, but I'm a psycholytic somatic therapist in the beautiful state of Oregon. And I've been in the trenches for about 40 years with psychedelic medicines, once upon a time in the underground world and now above ground. And just passionate about this work, these medicines, and I wouldn't be here without them. So very, very grateful for these medicines. And I'm going to now segue into our guest tonight. So I'm very excited, actually, very excited to have Dr. Jeff McNairy with us, and we had a chance to speak this week, and just a wonderful soul and a kindred spirit, and on the path, on the mission to be in service to folks. But here's his official biography. So Dr. Jeff McNairy has been working in the healthcare field for 25 years. He has worked in a variety of medical environments and seen the struggle individuals have when actually trying to heal. The current Western healthcare system is deficient in healing the population. It is more concerned with managing symptoms and using external sources for change. Through Dr. McNairy's intense experience with the most desperate patient populations, addiction, acute mental health, and trauma, he has seen that the only real healing can come from within. 100% agree with that. That's spot on, Jeff.
Yeah.
So, Jeff, welcome. Very, very deep, warm-hearted, loving welcome to Webdelics and our AMA. An honor to have you here, and honoring all the work you've done. And I kind of want to start off with that honoring of your path and how'd you end up, from, a little bit of your bio, guy grew up in LA and now living in Costa Rica with arrhythmia. So
yes.
Yeah, if we could just start with just kind of a little deeper dive into the world of Jeff.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I'm excited to share what I know and learn as well from you. So it's going to be a great one. I started off my academic career studying medical anthropology, and I really found that to be a fascinating field, looking at the cultural components of healthcare, and a lot of it was about indigenous medicines. And when I got ready to graduate, I was gonna maybe go get a doctorate in that. So I applied to a bunch of schools. I got into Berkeley, and before I decided to dive into a PhD in medical anthropology, I said I should probably figure out if I really want to do this for the rest of my life and become like a tenured professor, because that's a very specific track. So I deferred my enrollment at Berkeley and went to the UCLA Neuropsychiatric Institute and did research there for a year on MedAnthro. And that's when the study we were doing was on prenatal diagnostic screening tests for Latin American first generation women in LA, and the cultural components of genetic testing and birth defects and all this, how it was impacting them socially and culturally and religiously in their lives. So it was very fascinating. However, after that year, I saw that the lifestyle of my professors that were working with me was very, let's say, restricted. They didn't have usually kids. They didn't usually do much else. They were very focused. They were the experts in the field. Her name was Dr. Carol Browner. It's like the #1 male anthropologist in the world. Lots of published papers. And she said, you know, Jeff, like, I understand this probably, you're not feeling this is for you, maybe. Why don't you get a master's degree in public health here at UCLA? And why don't you apply and do that? Because it's more hands-on. So I decided to do that. I got into the School of Public Health and I learned how to do program development, healthcare licensing, and government health programs. And that's where I started managing all the OBGYN clinics on the outpatient side of the UCLA Med Center. And in those clinics, there were women that were showing up that had a lot of trauma. And because we were a medical facility, we weren't addressing the trauma at all. And the OBGYN docs that were doing their rounds through there with the nurse practitioners were not equipped to deal with the trauma. So I found that that was a deficiency in the system. And I became interested in maybe looking down a mental health path. And so what I did, as I said, I'm going to become, I was at that time wanting to be an OBGYN myself. So I applied to medical school. I got into UCLA, but I had decided during this whole working at the clinic there that this wasn't for me either. And I wanted to get a doctorate in psychology to really address the mental health issues that these people were going through. So while I was a mental health postdoc, I'd been through my doctorate already. I was managing a rehab in Malibu called Passages, and I was the administrative director. And it was kind of one of these crazy, like high-end places that works with addiction, and it's kind of well known in the world or whatever. And it was the cool thing about that place is it was so expensive that it had a lot of money to do a lot of different types of treatment. And so that's where I learned about more holistic sides of healthcare, like body work, spiritual counseling, nutrition, Chinese medicine, and all those types of alternative therapies that were not taught to me when I was at UCLA. So I really liked that. And at one point, a patient came in named Gerard Powell, and he was a really difficult guy, a lot of drug and alcohol issues, self-made guy from Scranton, Pennsylvania. And he didn't want to work with anybody in that facility because he couldn't connect to them. So I decided to work with this dude myself, which I wasn't regularly doing. I was just managing the place, but I took him on as a client and I worked with him every single day for about 2 months. And then he discharged and I put him into my private practice for 5 years, and we really got nowhere. The guy was still using, he was still relapsing. He had kicked the one drug of choice that he had, which was Demerol, which is a very strong opiate for surgery. And see, he owned surgery centers in his business life. And so he had access to all these meds, very dangerous. So at year 5 of working with him very intensely, he got suicidal, and he was very upset and very sad and depressed. And I just didn't know what to do with him. I was basically at that point just trying to keep him alive. So that's where Jerry came down to Costa Rica and tried plant medicine, and it flipped him around, and it made him totally different in a great way. And that's where I got interested, and I tried it myself. So that was in 2014 when that first happened.
What medicine was that flipped him around?
That was Iboga.
Oh, beautiful. Yes. Beautiful story. Quite a path.
Well, basically what ended up happening was I had my own experience with the medicine of Iboga, which is from our particular medicine was from Gabon, Africa, it's in the Congo Basin. And we had an amazing shaman who was like the #1 shaman for that in the world, a Bawidi 10th generation shaman, and very powerful, very deep. And we decided that we wanted to have a place that people could come to that would be really safe, because where we did it with this shaman was not safe. It was dirty. There was no medical care. It was a little sketchy, and we just didn't feel comfortable there. Even though the shaman was amazing, it wasn't a good environment. And we thought, we're tough guys, we can handle it, but we didn't see this as a mainstream thing in that setting. So we wanted to have a place that was more inviting, and that's kind of what sparked the whole beginning of where we moved to Costa Rica.
Well, what was the gentleman's name? Jerry
Powell, and he's the
Jerry.
CEO of Rhythmia now. But
Oh, wow.
but
Okay.
yeah, he was a patient of mine in 2004. No, in 2009, I met him.
Yeah, it's always fascinating how someone can show up in your life and then change your entire life.
That's how that was with him. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Jeff.
You're
And
welcome.
yeah, and a big thank you to Jerry for what he's created with Rhythmia.
Yes.
So let's go ahead and dive into our first question from the wonderful wide world of folks out there. So kind of a nice segue from what you were just talking about with trauma. What types of trauma respond best to plant medicine? And are there cases where it may not be appropriate? Good question, very relevant and very important.
Very much so. And when people ask me, what is plant medicine for mostly, if I could say one issue, which of course there's many things that it works well for, I often say trauma. And the reason for that is because we've seen veterans of the military that have a lot of trauma from war heal themselves and get past their PTS. And we've also had a lot of people that have had childhood abusive trauma, and they get past that and become released and free from it. And when I was working in the psychiatric hospital in Los Angeles, where I have my private practice, in order to do trauma work with someone, it would usually take about 5 years to really get to have them trust you and open up. And the beauty of plant medicine with trauma is it helps you very quickly open it up and release it. So I think the only types of maybe struggles that I've seen with people that have trauma is the complex trauma, where there's multiple layers of trauma. It doesn't mean that it's not appropriate for them. It just means it's going to be a lot more intense. And I think what's even more important than the actual plant medicine experience with the trauma is what kind of supportive network do you have afterwards to help with the integration, because that's really where the work begins.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for a lot of, I mean, that's a huge point for a lot of folks. It's, there's this hype now about the magic pill of psychedelics, and the session, the experience is part of it, but then what do you do with that? And that's where I think, the integration and exactly what you said, community. And I know a little segue here, but like in the ibogaine community, if an addict goes through, the incredible experience of ibogaine and gets new downloads, understands why they became an addict and everything, blah, blah, just the huge breakthrough, but then they go back to their old friends, their old environment, and then there's two habits. There's the habit of the drug, and then there's the habit of the environment.
Absolutely.
And so you gotta, I think it's so huge and so important to listen to what you got from that experience and then apply it into your life. And that's the work.
That is the work. And that without that, it's kind of pointless, in my opinion, to go through the whole plant medicine process if you're not going to use the tools that you've learned and move forward in a new productive way with that integration protocol.
Yes, very important. And then one thing I just want to add into for folks out there, like with complex PTSD or dissociative PTSD, if there's pre-verbal trauma, really intense, gnarly trauma, sometimes low and slow is better.
Yes.
I'm kind of speaking to my own choir here, because that's what kind of where I've niched into, is that working with like low dose ketamine and going a little bit, not going into that catalytic big experience, but more just starting with some of the body grounding, working through dissociation. So for some folks, a low and slow approach, and that's where I think, and then screening, I think, is so important. And I think we may have a question about that some coming up, but I want to go to our next question here.
Great.
So Eric, if you want to pop that up, please. Ooh, another great one. Like, kind of relative to that last question, but perfect. What are the biggest risks people underestimate when considering ayahuasca or plant medicine retreats? Another great question.
A great question. Very important, because when people are going through a retreat with ayahuasca or any plant medicine, they're very vulnerable, and they're going to be in the hands of other people that they don't know. And the integrity of the staff working there and of the shamanic team is very important. And you have to have a place that's really safe, and a place that has, for example, at Rhythmia, we have a medical license to serve ayahuasca. And so we have to follow protocols that ensure safety. But out in the jungle, where I did most of my ceremonies before Rhythmia, it was a little sketchy, and the medical care was non-existent. And luckily we had great shamans, but I hear a lot of stories out there in the world where the shamans take advantage of the people when they're under the medicine influence, or it's just inappropriate relationships can happen. And it's just, people are vulnerable. And if you're working on trauma or any sort of other emotional issues, you can't actually work on those things if you feel like you're hyper vigilant, even in the ceremony. So it's kind of doesn't really work too well.
Yeah. I think it goes back to, 60s 101 psychedelic set and setting.
Yes,
And
100%.
the setting is so important. I think that is one of the bigger risks of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, the wrong person who is administering or guiding. And that's where,
Yes.
it's important, know your source, know your drugs, but know who's with you.
100%. And what's interesting is that a lot of the research coming out does show the importance of set and setting, and it's actually effective for the results. And there's a rite of passage sort of energy, and like sort of an initiation component that people, the humans, like to go through. It gives a sense of belonging. It gives purpose. Sometimes the mysticism involved is very intriguing and healing. So all of that, the set and setting is good. I always tell people, like, you could go do this in a basement in Brooklyn, and you could have a great experience, but why risk it when you know there's other places that can really have an integrity-based place to do this in a safe manner?
Yeah, and one thing I'd like to add to this also is, the folks who want to do it alone in the basement. But again, if there's trauma, trauma is a relational wound, and now you're exposing yourself, and a lot of it, going through a traumatic experience is, even though something's happening to you, the experience is I'm all alone. No one's here to save me, protect me. I don't even exist. Something just bad is happening to me. Then you're doing one of these experiences by yourself, and
Yes.
not a good setting there. But I think, so folks who are starting this work, especially if there's trauma, don't do it on your own. Like, find a good, two things: find a good guide, good shaman, do your research, talk to people, and then kind of what we were talking about earlier, the importance of aftercare, that you have a community. So you're not, blown open in, Costa Rica and going back to Topeka, Kansas with, your standard coworkers, your family who you didn't even tell you're doing this, your buddies who you didn't tell. And now you're just like, you're kind of lost because you've had this incredible catalytic experience, sometimes mind blowing. And now back to, Topeka. So so important. So I think that's actually one of the risks, to not have support. Have support. Have a a team ready for you. Community.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's so important. It's everything.
And I think I plug this every time, is also, if there's no one in your community, there is someone in your community, and the psychedelic communities are everywhere right now as far as support. So they're out there. Find the others. Okay.
That's
so
right.
Our next question, please. Good one. Do you think access to plant medicine should be more regulated or more open?
That's an easy one for me. That's an easy one for me. I think it should be much more open. And a lot of these plant medicines, the ones that I work with in Costa Rica, are still on the Schedule 1 substance list. And that's back from the 60s, when the Vietnam War was happening, and the government was saying that all the protesters were these drug-induced hippie people, like, rebelling against the government. So we're going to put all their psychedelics on a list, and we're going to ban it. It's more complicated than just that, but that was part of the energy there. And so definitely, right? And so it's slowly changing, but I think access to these plants have been shut down for a very long time. There's just recently things that I'm sure we're going to talk about, where it's becoming more open. When I say that it should be more open, yes, but there should be safety regulations surrounding them, of course. And the contraindications that exist for people that want to participate, those need to be evaluated and looked at. So overall, in general, my belief is that the plant medicine should be much more accessible and much more open. And the field of mental health should be training in these areas. And there are some groups that are doing it, such as MAPS and ICEERs and things, and they're training therapists to do post-integration work and things. So it's going down a path now that's really good, but we just need more societal acceptance and government openness.
Hmm. What are your thoughts? I was kind of related to all this with the number of like religious churches that are opening to, as far as increasing access.
Mhm.
What's your any thoughts on that, Jeff?
Yeah, so there's the Santo Daime religion from Brazil is a very popular one that's global, and
Hmm.
there's a lot of them in the U.S. and other parts. And those places are really good. However, if you don't fit into their sort of ideology, which is, for example, Santo Daime is a Christian-based doctrine,
Hmm.
and so it has that edge to it, and that's beautiful for the people that are in that zone. But if you're looking for just an openness and an experience that maybe doesn't have that angle, then that might not be a good fit for somebody. But I think that the challenge that those religions and those sort of the leeway that those organizations have legally, sometimes it can go down a strange road that
Hmm.
I've seen it a few times, and it becomes not, I wouldn't say a cult. That's way too strong of a word, but it becomes something that becomes a closed system that starts to go down a path of control and sort of authority that might not be in the right place. And again,
Hmm.
not all of them are like that, but I've seen pockets of that jump up here and there. A couple in Florida that I've noticed.
Yeah. My general take on this is, yes, it needs to be more accessible, and just to me, it's insane. So I'm out in the woods. I live out in this beautiful 160 acres, and there's mushrooms. And then the fact that if I pick one that just happens to be psychedelic, I just broke the law.
Yeah,
And
that's
even in a
crazy.
state where it's a state like Oregon, where it's legal but not legal. And I
Yeah,
think, for me, it's just, it's our bodies. We have the right to put in our body whatever we choose.
I agree.
And I s and, like, I know you said something about, safety regulations. I think within any medical model, yes, and then there's, these different avenues for access as far as recreational, spiritual, and I think, there's nothing wrong with sitting around a campfire with, 3 grams of mushrooms in you.
That's right.
I mean, that's a sacred place, and it's a sacred right.
Absolutely.
So I think, there
100%.
should be access. I think these are not, it's not heroin, it's not methamphetamine, but there is also, there's risks, and that's where more education, destigmatizing and access to education and knowing these medicines.
Yes,
Yeah, more of that, please.
I agree completely.
So we have a comment coming in from LinkedIn. How do we go from believe to know?
Mm, that's a
That's a
really
good
good
one.
question. That's a very interesting one because when I was working with the Bwiti shaman with my first plant medicine experience with Iboga, the whole Bwiti tribe believes in knowing and not having just the faith side that we're used to in the Christian Judeo sort of Western ideology. And I'm like, what did you mean by that? Like, no. Well, when you're on a journey with Iboga, there is very fact based and very informational based, and you get answers to questions that are very crystal clear. And
Mhm.
so their whole culture was about knowing what to do and answering things. And I think that has a lot to do with the rugged environment of the Congo and having a lot of predatory, sort of really wild animals out there and just harsh conditions. That it's more about, you can't just put everything up to faith. You really got
Mhm.
to know what's happening for survival. So that sort of culture has gone into, I believe, other areas of plant medicine. And where ayahuasca is a little bit more, they call it the mother, whereas Iboga is more of like the stern grandfather,
Oh, yeah.
meaning more direct, more on point, where the mother would be a little bit more like a mom, like just loving, maternal, maybe not telling you exactly what to do, but encouraging you to do something. And that energy is still about knowing who you are and taking chances and risks that are beneficial for you in a healthy way.
Mhm.
So it's a great question, you know, and I think that's a big question for ideology, philosophy, religion, etc. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think for me, the believing to knowing, the knowing is embodied awareness, because the believing is just a cognitive primary or secondary consciousness endeavor, and the knowing is more primary conscious and an embodied awareness, and embodied where you feel it in your bones. It's a
Hmm.
visceral, oh, now I
Hmm.
get it. I thought
Yes.
I got it. Now I get it. But how do you
Yes.
get there? I mean, for me, that's the magic question. How do you get there to embodied awareness, to embodied knowing? And plant medicines are one of the best way because it gets this, the thinker out of the way, the figurer out, the analyzer,
That's right.
and it just allows us then to that direct access of information that
We
becomes more cellular
yes. Yes.
than just in your head.
Hmm. We teach people three intentions because we believe that intention setting is a big part of a plant medicine experience.
Yes.
There's also times where you don't have an intention, you just want to enjoy the process and see
Mhm.
what happens, and that's great too because it gives a groundedness and an openness that's really beautiful. But
Yes.
we have intentions that are very simple that we teach people. It's show me who I've become. That's just about learning that whatever dissociated sort of vibe I might be in, maybe since childhood, and then
Mhm.
merge me back with my soul at all costs. So that's to unplug from the dissociated place and ground yourself in who you really are. And then the third one is heal my heart. And that's where you get rid of the trauma and the pain and the sadness and the guilt and the shame and whatever that we've been
Mhm.
holding on to. And when we see that when people do that and they follow those protocols for those intentions, they really get plugged in to themselves and they have what we call personal sovereignty, to have clarity and empowerment, to be confident in themselves. So that's kind of like a thing we teach people, and we measure it at the end of the week when they come to see us. And it's just something that even in epigenetics, what I've been learning and studying is that the intention behind an epigenetic process is very important for that genetic healing to occur.
Yes. I think one of the all that was beautiful, but I just want to emphasize the personal sovereignty. That's a huge thing. This is like, this is your home. This is your body. And what
Hmm.
do you want in there? What voices do you want in there? Do you want other people's voices, or do you want your knowing, your voice?
That's right.
And that sovereignty thing is a huge one. And that's for me, so the clients I work with, it's always, I call it coming home to body, your body, clearing out
Yes.
what no longer serves you, clearing out what's not yours, which a lot of times is, just familial stuff, cultural stuff, but it's all
Hmm.
stuff.
Yeah.
So sovereignty, amen. Hey,
And
brother.
some people, just the last word on that. Some people feel when they've been abused or neglected that their empowerment and sovereignty has been taken. They feel that way. And so
Mhm.
what plant medicine does is it helps you get it back, and then you
Yeah,
can be more assertive. So it's beautiful in that way.
empowered. Okay, before our next question, I want to just let everyone know you're watching the Webdelics AMA with Jeff McNairy, and we're talking about the wonderful world of revolutionary power of plant medicines and mental health. And again, our QR code up in the corner to go to Webdelics, sign up for our website, and then also we do this every month. Next month we'll have Richie Ogolnik, who's one of the OGs of the ibogaine world.
Hmm.
So that'll be, I think, May 28th. So our
Amazing.
next question is a kicker, is a big one.
Hmm.
This is the biggest news in 50 years, 50 some years, ever since psychedelics got kiboshed in the late 70s or late 60s.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, this could be, every one of these questions we could talk about an hour on every one of them. So this
Yes.
one will be interesting, and I'm glad this one came up. I figured it would come up. But
Hmm.
Jeff, what are your thoughts on Trump's new executive order on psychedelic drugs?
I couldn't be happier. I'm very glad to hear that this is happening. And the
Mhm.
reason is because with the drugs that the psychedelic medicines that they're talking about, especially the ibogaine, is extremely therapeutic for people. And with the opiate crisis that's been going on for decades, ibogaine in particular addresses the withdrawal symptoms and gets people on track. Because we all know heroin addicts, like you mentioned earlier, they face two things. They face the chemical dependency that the drug creates, and then
Mhm.
they face the triggered environments of discontent in their patterns in life.
Mhm.
So you cannot change the patterns in life and get new friends and get a better job if you're constantly craving opiates. You have to get the opiate thing past. You have to get past it. And what ibogaine does is it helps that tremendously. In one night, you can be done with withdrawal. So I am a huge fan of that executive order, and I know that it's going to open the doors for a lot of things to come forward again, and we can get back on track from the 60s and start using these things clinically and socially in a way that's beneficial.
Yeah. I'm very excited about it too. And I think for me, part of my mission has always been, an advocate for psychedelic therapy, psychedelic medicines, but also just destigmatizing these substances. They're not
Mhm,
evil, they're not bad. They're part of
mhm.
our like genetic makeup. I mean, it's been,
Yes,
altered states are that's who we are, man.
that's right.
We're tripping monkeys.
Yeah, exactly.
And we're wired for altered states.
Mhm,
And
that's
these
right.
plant medicines have been sacred for, thousands and thousands of years. And so there should be access. And so for me, the biggest beauty is just this destigmatization. Like the US government going, okay, these things are important. These are going to get fast tracked through. This is a good thing. We have a mental
Mhm,
health crisis, and acknowledging what we're doing ain't working. So that's a
that's right.
huge thing too. I mean, I'm like, thank God. They're like
Mhm,
waking up that it isn't working. So that's all huge. And I know there's some folks who, but it's a medical model. It's got to be through, a service center. It's got to be, that's not, psilocybin mushroom. It's a patented molecule that
mhm,
has one little thingy knocked off of it. So they have a patent on it.
mhm,
It's going to be very expensive. Insurance
mhm,
isn't going to cover it, likely will cover it. And it's, it's not the pure molecule. And so yes, I agree with all that, and then but the bottom line is there is gonna be access, there is gonna be destigmatization. This
mhm,
opens the door for other, other, things we can't even imagine as far as where this is gonna take us. So, I think
yes.
yeah, it's a huge win for America, I believe.
No question. And I'm really happy that prior to this, some high net worth, high celebrity type people have been advocates for this, like Aaron Rodgers from the NFL. Other
Mhm.
people, celebrities have talked about on their platforms how they've changed and how it's helped their lives. So I think there's been a really good sort of build up to have this executive order occur. And I'm just really excited for the future now.
Yeah, and then for me, the only other my other 2 cents, and this is kinda always my 2 cents, and it's been the 2 cents already on this, is we need integration and we need support. So, because
Yes.
none of that's in the executive order. It's all about the molecule.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
what's so important is, well, again, the screening, the session itself, but then that integration and then the community support and the
It's
tools
huge.
for that.
It's
Because we're
really
gonna have a lot
important.
of folks going through, and we really need, yeah, systems, and I think that's gonna be up to we, the people, to create that. So I don't
Yes.
think it's gonna be a government mandate, but I think, these organizations that are gonna be launching these services, I mean, just
Mhm.
please, please, please bring integration into the mix and support. And I know
Yes.
that's a big part of Rhythmia too, in our conversation as far as
Mhm.
making sure there's aftercare support. I'm
Yes.
curious, do you wanna, because that's, like, so, you have a medical model, you have a medical license, it's,
Yeah,
you're kinda doing it.
we
And then,
are.
so can you share a little bit about the community, what you guys are doing as far as the integration, how that looks for you and
Yeah,
the folks
so
going through?
after people go through our week-long program, they get access to an aftercare app called Our Life, and in that app, for 13 weeks, they have content, groups, one-on-one coaching, guided meditations, all kinds of things that they can help use to integrate. On Thursdays, every week, I give an integration class that prepares them to go home and what to work on and what to expect and how to handle different situations with friends and family and job. And then we
Beautiful.
check in with our guests after they leave at intervals throughout the next couple years. And what we're doing when we talk to them is just checking in. How are you doing? Do you need anything? How's your community? Do you have a community? because every week we put people in, we call it a light worker group. That's what we've named them. And everybody from that week goes into a group where they can all collaborate and talk and hang out with each other. And they often do reunions and come back together, or they bring their friends and their family next time. And it's this really, really great community that we have established. We've had 23,000 people come through our doors in the last 10 years since we've been open. And we have a huge network of people that we have in almost every major city, and then little cities that nobody's ever heard of. So it, as you mentioned earlier, it's kind of, you go back to a little town in Indiana or Kansas, and you might not have any like-minded people anywhere around you. But on the internet, you can connect with those groups. And in Rhythmia, we have a wealth of people and information that allows this connection, because without integration, they're going to go back to the old habits. It's almost inevitable. Yes. I learned that in my addiction field when I worked with people that newly sober. They had to do aftercare or else they were going to relapse. And it's sort of similar in this way. You have to start using the tools and integrate them into your life, or else you're just going to go back to the old behaviors that got you in the position you're in.
Yep. Well stated. So, yeah. So then just wrapping that up, yay. I never thought I'd say this. Yay, President Trump.
Yeah, me too. I know he's doing something really good, and that's what it is.
Yeah. So, yeah. So yeah. And I know there's a lot of naysayers out there within the psychedelic community, but I'm in the, this is good. This is good. It's bringing it more in again, destigmatizing it, bringing it into the conversation. That's right. It's, what we're doing ain't working, and we needed a switch. And this is, the beginning of that switch.
That's right.
So, I love this one. Perfect segue. What does the ideal future of psychedelic assisted healing look like?
Ooh, amazing. There's been a few schools that have popped up recently that are having psychedelic assisted degree programs and psychedelic assisted training. I know there's some continuing ed hours for different mental health professionals that are in this field and in that line of thinking. And like I mentioned earlier, MAPS and ICEERS and other groups, they have a network of aftercare therapists, all different types, whether it's master's level MFTs, MSWs, or doctorate level psychologists who are being trained in how to help people post plant medicine. And so I believe that it's crucial. And I also think that that type of therapy is probably going to almost completely replace the old way. Not completely, but almost completely. Because what we say when people come to Rhythmia is that they do about 20 years of therapy in a week. They get through so much so quickly. And because of the quick nature of it, it can be a little overwhelming. There's all these things that, oh my gosh, I just released all this trauma, or I have this clarity, and now there's all this, it's kind of chaotic for some. And so to have that person that can help frame it and help support you post ceremony is very important. So I'm a big fan of therapists and coaches and all the different types of mental health therapy professionals getting trained in the psychedelic assisted therapy. We're looking to build a continuing ed hour course that anyone could go through to help make them proficient in this area.
Yes, beautiful. One thing I'd like to add is access, that it becomes affordable. So part of this, the healing would be the future utopian psychedelic world where it's not $8,000 out of pocket.
100%.
And so programs or insurance or state funded system that allows the underserved, the people that sometimes need this the most. I mean,
absolutely. And
across the board, everyone.
What's interesting is we've had some people come through our doors, and then we give them a super bill at the end, and they've gotten reimbursed from their insurance companies depending on the type of insurance. And that's been very encouraging.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's really nice. It hasn't been the norm, but we've had about maybe 30% of people get reimbursed after the fact. And I also think that it's important that my background is in low income underserved. That's where I come from in my family, in my life growing up as a kid. And that's also what my training was in before Passages. So we have a scholarship program at Rhythmia that's free for people. And our motto is, if you want to come, you will get there one way or the other. and we have people that donate money for scholarships, and we just ourselves make the program free. We've donated $1 million in the last year to have people come for free to our program. So it is very important. And we do veteran discounts, and we do a lot of discounts for people that might not have the funds. And I think that's a big part of this whole thing. It has to be affordable for people.
Yeah, access.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Yes.
the only other touched on it, for me, I would love to see decriminalization, widespread, nationwide.
Yes. Yes.
And then
100%.
again, so you're walking in the woods and you can eat that mushroom and it's not going to put you in jail for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I agree. Yes.
So let's make all that happen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next question here. Do you believe plant medicine will change how we treat mental health, or will it remain a niche approach?
Well, what I've seen in my career so far in the last 10 years is it is absolutely going to change the way mental health is done. We have every single week here, we have psychologists, master's level therapists, and coaches come as clients here. And I ask them, I always am intrigued when they come, and doctors too, psychiatrists, all types of medical people, nurses, everybody. And I tell the therapist in particular, I ask them, like, how come you're coming? Like, what's your goal? And they said, I've had so many people go and do plant medicine retreats and come back and fire me that I wanted to know what the heck is going on. So they came and they saw what was happening, and they immediately got it and immediately shifted into a referral base for us. And now they're doing integration work. And I do think there's a role, of course, for people to do the prep that are therapists. Absolutely. But the psychedelic sort of the urgency behind the approach, meaning that it's happening fast, is going to demand that the field shifts.
Yes, shift happens.
Yeah. Yes.
And I think one thing that popped in my head on this one is back when my first iteration of Terra was doing psychedelic therapy symposiums back 2015, 16, 17, kind of before the big wave started. But a lot of therapists would show up. And a lot of them would, and especially the older guys and ladies, who are, in their 60s, about to retire, would share, my whole life, I feel like I haven't really done anything for a lot of my clients. I couldn't help them. And it was, and I go, retiring and now knowing there's a lot of folks I couldn't help them. And I, saw them every day for years and years, or not every week or once a month for years and years. And I didn't do anything. And so there's so much, there's talk about knowing, there's a lot of knowing that what we're doing ain't working. I'm using ain't a lot tonight. So I think, it's going to be more of the norm than a niche. I think it's going to spread it because, and also even with antidepressants, there's more and more just folks know those don't work. I'm not, some folks that works and some, help some people and save some people's lives, but in general, SSRIs aren't the answer.
That's right.
Because it's all about symptom suppression. And we've got to get into this more knowing of, no, we've got to find out what's in there, release, not suppress, release, move it out. Exactly. So I think within the psychedelic world, I think there's going to be these big catalytic experiences. And I think the psycholytic or small dose is also, in a more of a body focused somatic approach is also going to become part of this, this scene. So it's going to be, a true body, mind, spirit approach.
We teach people the psychosomatic process when they're here, because ayahuasca tends, as you know, to be a little bit more purgative than some of the other plant medicines. And sometimes that might intimidate some people that don't have experience with it. But what happens, as you know, is that there's an immediate release that's emotional when there's this purge. And that's the psychosomatic response. It's very important.
Yes. Release. Don't suppress.
Yes.
That's what is just, I wish I could use an F-bomb here, but effing up our culture, our humanity of this. We're a humanity, a culture of suppression.
Yes.
We need expression, release.
That's right.
Don't
100%.
shove it down. Open it up.
I agree completely.
Okay. Ooh, I like this one.
Me too.
Do you think some people become dependent on repeated ceremonies instead of doing the deeper integration work? Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
100%.
Absolutely. 100%. And, people can get, I worked in addiction for many years, and you can get addicted to pretty much anything. And the way you know if it's an addiction, whether it's a behavior or a substance or whatever, is if you're using that behavior or that substance to block an emotional process that you want to avoid because it's too painful or too scary or too hard. And so that's where the addiction can start, and then it just gets out of control. So I've seen a lot of people that have gone to plant medicine experiences and they loved it, and they had a breakthrough. But then instead of integrating and using the tools, like as we mentioned, the real work starting, they bury themselves again in another ceremony. And then it
Mhm.
just becomes this pattern. And then often those people will say, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to go follow around these shamans, and I'm going to like be a helper. And again, that's cool. I mean, it's fun, I'm sure, and it's interesting. But those people are often at high risk to not really do their own work and to avoid it through much, just more and more ceremonies. So I don't find a benefit in that personally.
Yeah. No, 100% agree. And I think there's a thing, spiritual bypassing. I think there's psychedelic
Mhm.
bypassing. It's
Totally.
when's the next ceremony? And the
Yeah.
people that are, going to here and then here and then here and then here and then going to try this medicine, then this combo.
Yeah.
And, you're getting a lot of insight there, but it's not getting installed. And
That's right.
and a lot of folks, yeah, you're avoiding what needs to be touched. And
I
you're
always
living up
tell them,
here
yes.
in the ethers and the spiritual realms and love and light, but body's going, hey man, might be the 3-year-old who's still going, you got insight, I got trauma.
That's right. That's right. I always tell people that a plant medicine ceremony done right means that you have no interest in jumping right back into that for any time soon, because it
Yeah,
was hard work. And if you're just like, hey, I want to do it again in a month or a week, that means you're not doing the deep work. You're avoiding it.
yes, I agree with that. 100%. Yes.
Mhm.
Okay, next question. Can you tell us more about ayahuasca specifically? What makes it different than the rest of the psychedelics?
Okay, I love this question, obviously. So, um, ayahuasca is a blend of two plants, and it's the ayahuasca vine, which is a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, and I'll explain why that's important in just a second. Then the other plant is a DMT-rich leaf-based plant that's regional, depending on where the shamans are from and where these tribes have had their plants growing. So that's why the Peruvian ayahuasca is a little different than the Colombian, a little different than Brazilian, because there's different DMT plants that the shamanic tribes have been using that are a little different than the others. So when you blend these two plants together in a drink, and it's an extraction process to get the active ingredients out, which we call beta carbolines and alkaloids from the vine. Those things mix together, and then it's like a tea or a small drink, and you swallow it. And then what happens is it activates your own natural DMT, because in us, we all have DMT in us, and all plants do, almost all mammals do. And so DMT is an interesting molecule because it's released naturally when we're born, when we die, and when we have lucid dreams. There's also different moments it's released, like moments of intuition or connection to people. Like you think about your friend, then he calls you. So there's all these different kind of moments with DMT flowing. But in a Western culture, we've blocked the natural pathway of DMT release through environmental conditions, poor eating, negative thinking, bad water, all kinds of stuff. And so I need to prime the pump of my natural DMT reserve. So I drink ayahuasca and it activates my own. And I learned this from farming people that come to Rhythmia. When you have a dry well that's not pumping water, you add water and then it starts to work and the water comes out. So that's the prime the pump concept, that we put this into our body and it starts to activate our own natural DMT. And so the reason why that's important is because if you are blocked in your own release, then you can become unhappy, you can become lost, you have a lot of mental health issues that can happen. We want you to get back to the true self, and the DMT is a big part of that. So ayahuasca is an indigenous drink that's been around for thousands of years. And it's just lately, I guess in the last maybe 10, 20 years, becoming, before that too, but in a small way, it's become more out into the mainstream. And it's something that is becoming more available to people. So the reason why the MAOI is so important in the vine is because it turns off the stomach enzymes that would normally break down the DMT, and it doesn't do that. It shuts them off temporarily, and then you can absorb the DMT into the body. So that's why the MAOI is so important, the vine component. And that's what sets it apart from other psychedelics. The other psychedelics don't have that same interaction. And LSD, for example, is not a part of us already, even though there's chemicals that are similar. But it's the DMT is a really key thing about the ayahuasca in particular.
Mm-hmm. Could you compare and contrast? So a lot of information, knowledge, or interest in psilocybin. Like compare, contrast psilocybin and ayahuasca.
Yeah. So the way I usually explain that is both are amazing, and I'm a huge fan of the psilocybin as well. And from what I've learned and studied and participated in myself, what I've seen is when you're participating and sitting with psilocybin, it's often that you are enmeshing with your environment and you're having clarity based on a connection that's very earth based. And sometimes you're just in the process, not just, but you're in the process and it's happening with you and around you, and you become a part of it. Now, and that's amazing because it gives you perspective. It helps you shift from what we call an egosyntonic position to an ego dystonic position, which I'll explain why that's important in a second. So ayahuasca, the difference is, in my opinion, is that it's a little bit more of a guided experience. You can tell the ayahuasca process. You can say, I'm too dizzy. Can we hold off on this for a minute? I'm getting scared, or I'm overwhelmed with all this trauma. And it will back off and it will honor your intentions. So I've found the ayahuasca to be a little bit more something you can guide, and it goes down a road of unearthing things in the amygdala part of the brain where we've been storing emotional baggage, and it releases those things to the prefrontal cortex. Whereas psilocybin, it like I said, it sort of enmeshes us with our surroundings, which is why a lot of people like to go into nature when they have psilocybin, and they really connect with everything around them, because we learned that, we are connected to everything, the rocks, the trees, the animals. Yes. And that's a beautiful perspective to have.
Yes. Great. Yeah. Love all those. And I think what's fascinating with all these medicines, they have their own frequency, their own channel, they're in kind of their own little specialty. And then I'm curious, add one more question to this original question. Is there any medicine you'd recommend people start with? So someone's never done a psychedelic in their life, but they're like, I want to try it. What would you say? Start with this, or
this has changed. My opinion on this has changed over the years. And right now, what I believe is a great starting one is ketamine. And the reason I believe that, even though it's synthetic, is because it can be very tightly monitored and controlled in a really safe way. I found that it gives people confidence to go deeper with some of these other plant medicines. Now, if I was going to say, let's throw out the synthetic ones for whatever reason, even though I think they're amazing, I would say cannabis done the right way with intentions is a really good starting point as well, at a lower dose. And I jumped right into the fire. I went right for the iboga. That was my first plant medicine, and people laugh at me. They laugh at me and say, "What the heck were you doing?" It's like, but that still is to this day my favorite. So I think it's very personal, But I would recommend what I said about the ketamine. I think is a good starting point.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I think the beauty about ketamine, one, it can be not intense, but it can be way out there.
Yeah.
But it's a controlled way out there, and it's 45 minutes.
Exactly.
So right. I recommend that for a lot of folks, especially if there's trauma, start low dose, and then, but ketamine is a beautiful intro.
Yeah.
And then I think it is kind of personal on whatever works for you is best. And let's see, what are we doing on time? Oh, we got 5 to 6. Time goes
All
by when
right.
you're having fun. So
Sure
we have,
does.
let's just do this as our final question.
Okay.
Who would ayahuasca not be good for?
Okay. So there are some contraindications with ayahuasca, and a lot of it has to do with the MAOI. And there's other reasons that are emotional based. So it's not good for people that have a diagnosis of bipolar 1. And the reason for that is because a bipolar 1 individual is often in a manic state. And ayahuasca is a serotonin agonist, meaning that it surges serotonin and it can add to the mania. So people with bipolar 1 should not participate unless it's under very strict circumstances. So bipolar 2 is not a problem for us. We can handle that because people are mostly in a depressed state. We can deal with it. Also, people that have certain cardiac issues, open heart surgery history, pacemakers that have been placed, the stroke history. We've had some people with stroke history, depending on what the stroke was, to be okay to do it. It's very important that the heart is healthy in a certain way. Now, people have high blood pressure all the time, and that's fine. We can control for that and monitor that. It's not a problem. And I think people that are not good for ayahuasca are people that do not have a good support network at home or in their environment. That's very key, because somebody gets opened up and they've released, and then they go home to something that's not supportive, not understanding, and they can kind of tank and take a nosedive. So it's important that there's at least some sort of community support that can come with the experience.
Yes. Great. So that was our final question. And then, so first of all, thank you, Jeff. And then thank you for all the folks who are out there watching this and the folks that'll watch this for the next few years. To
Yes.
take the time to listen to two dudes talking about psychedelics.
Thank
And
you.
then, Jeff, how do people reach out to get a hold of you if they have more questions?
So you can go to Instagram or Facebook and look up Rhythmia Life Advancement Center, or just Rhythmia, RYTHMIA.
Mhm.
And there's my email right there. You can email me with anything you want to talk about, questions, anything. And we have a website also. Just type in Rhythmia, and we're located in Costa Rica. So that's the best way to get a hold of us.
Cool. And then to get a hold of me, if you have any questions, I'm just Steve at omterra.org. Again, the company I founded and work for is Omterra. And then also, again, I'm also the subject matter expert for Webdelics. So reach out to me. And if you have ideas for future topics, or someone who you think would be amazing to be on the show, just reach out to me with that info. And also, I'm just always happy to talk about anyone about these substances. I think for most of us who are in this work, we're in it in service to help others. And I think for myself, it saved my life. And so anything I can do to kind of pass it on, I will be doing that till the end of the days. So once again, thank you all. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for support team that helped pull this together, and your support team that we worked with to get you on the show. And then again, next May 28th would be our next AMA with Richie Ogolnik, and a deep dive with the guy, 33 years of working with ibogaine, and phenomenal human.
Yes.
And then again, go to Webdelics, sign up for our newsletter, and we'll see you soon.
Okay. Thanks for having me. It was awesome.
Thanks again,
Thank you.
Joe. Yep.
Thank you. Appreciate it.